Hi everybody, Dwayne Lee at the LeanHRBlog. Welcome back. So I promised you we would talk a little bit more about RACI diagrams. So we're going to build one real quick, show you how you can use them in HR. So what we're going to do is diagram out the hiring process for a very generic setup. I use recruiting and hiring a lot because it's something we all tend to do, and so it's a little easier to understand than some other little nefarious processes. So we've got some key players in this, right? And that's where we want to start. We have a recruiter. We have HR, which might have another HR person involved. We have a hiring manager, and we'll say we have the IT function as well. They usually play a part with a new employee. So let's take a few things that have to go in here. First, we have source. We have to go find those candidates. We have interview. We have offer, and we have onboard. Now, obviously onboarding by itself is a pretty complex process. For the sake of this discussion though, we're just going to mark it as a single item. So with the RACI diagram, what we're really trying to do is make sure everyone understands their role in the process. So we've got the four things that we talked about, R-A-C-I. I'm sure that you've read the article. If not, there'll be a link to it. If you remember, it is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So those are the four pieces. Responsible, those are the people who are doing the work. Accountable, they're the ones whose feet are held to the fire if the work isn't done. Consulted, these are people who are contacted before the work is done. Informed, these are the ones who are told after the work is done. So everybody has different roles. The biggest rule is there can only be one accountable. You can be responsible and accountable, but someone has to be accountable for every step. So, let's talk about sourcing. That one's a pretty easy one, right? We know who is accountable for the sourcing piece. That's our recruiter, right? Who's accountable for the interviewing? In some organizations, that might be HR. Who's responsible and accountable for the offer? Let's say that's HR again, is accountable. And onboarding, the hiring manager. That's pretty easy. Allows us to see the handoffs, see how it flows from person to person. But of course, that person doesn't do all the work themselves, right? So now we talk about responsible. Who else is responsible for doing this work? So for sourcing, HR has a role to play, the hiring manager has a role to play. IT is not really involved at this point. For the interview, the recruiter might be part of it. For this example, let's say they're not. They source the candidates, hand them off to HR. So they're not really involved in this piece, although we do want to let them know before we start. So they are consulted. We let them know before we start interviewing, we've got some good slates, we're bringing these folks in to talk to them. Hiring manager absolutely has a responsibility when it comes to that. IT, again, not so much involved. So what do we do after we're done interviewing? Well, we also want to inform our recruiters that we're done interviewing, right? So they have a C and an I. Then we go to the offer stage. The recruiter, they're not responsible for it. They don't do offers. At least not in this example. We're going to leave that to HR. But we do want to consult and inform them. We consult them so that we get any information they might have. We inform them so after the offer's made, hopefully they'll stop sourcing for that job, unless of course you have another opening. Hiring manager is consulted, for sure. But we're going to say that HR is actually doing the work on this. They have the A and the R. The hiring manager will also be informed. Some organizations, the hiring manager might be doing the offer themselves, in which case that chart will look a little bit different. At this point, IT might get involved. In this situation, we're going to say that they are informed after an offer is made. That's because we're going to assume they'll say yes, because who wouldn't want to work with you, right? IT wants to jump in, they want to start building out systems, want to start getting network access set up, all the things we want to do prior to first day, which kind of leads us into onboarding. IT is responsible to make sure the onboarding is done. Make sure all the logistics are taken care of, the equipment is ready, they got a place to go. That could also be your facilities team. They have a role to play in that too. Hiring manager, we have said they are accountable. They have to do this work. And they're responsible too. They have some work to do. It's pretty rare that you'll see someone who is accountable and not responsible. So a lot of times people will leave off that second R. I'm just putting it here as an example. Is HR part of onboarding? Of course they are. And what about your recruiter? Are they involved in onboarding? Some people like to have the recruiter come in as that soft handoff, but usually that's been done, at least the way we're set up here, earlier in the process. Otherwise, they'd be doing the offers and be part of the onboarding. So in this case, we're going to say that they're not part of it, but we are going to inform them after we've started the onboarding process. Not after it's done, but after we've started. Because that's, again, another one of those handoff pieces so that the recruiter knows not only did we source somebody, not only did we interview and make them an offer, but they actually showed up for day one, which is always a nice plus. So this gives us a pretty clear indication of, for our hiring process, who is involved where. Now the nice thing about this is you shouldn't have any arguments afterwards. Well, who made the offer? Well, who's doing the interviews? Well, who's involved in sourcing these candidates? Well, who has to set things up for onboarding? You shouldn't have any of those discussions anymore because you've got it very, very clear here. The RACI is a great way to start your project team. This lets you know from the very beginning who's responsible and what they need to do on the project team. If you have this built together and everyone agrees to it, you'll have a whole lot less problems down the road with making sure the tasks are taken care of the way they're supposed to. Thanks for coming by. Talk to you later.